She was very funny and very unusual. I mean, maybe everyone feels this way about their parents, but I just have never met anyone remotely like her. She was so unconventional and definitely kind of depressed and angry, but also very warm. She was complicated, you know.
She was extremely articulate. She was commanding. She was smart, smart, smart. It's the only thing I can say. Everybody says that. And it wasn't just intellectually smart. Kathy was just life smart. My name is Sarette Scott, and I was a friend, a buddy, an actress that worked with Kathy Collins. It was one of the most beautiful times that I had in terms of a working experience. She was a friend again, she was a mentor. Sometimes she was a mother, and all of it was great.
I learned to say what I think. I learned, mostly strength. I mean, I think that's really what I got from her, was a lot of strength. I'm Nina Collins. I'm an author and the mother of 4, and also the daughter of Kathleen Collins, the author of Whatever Happened to Interracial Love, also known as Nur einmal auf Deutsch. It is easy to do evil things, easy to harm oneself. To do what is good for oneself, is very difficult. I remember her writing all the time. I mean, basically, so we lived in this house in Piermont, New York, just up the river. Her bedroom was on the 2nd floor in the front, facing the water, and it was a beautiful big room with 2 big windows, and she just wrote all day long in there. And, the sound of my childhood was her typing, just really all the time. And we weren't allowed to disturb her in the mornings. Like, she would work till like 1 or 2. And, she was always like scribbling and had like pieces of paper with notes all over the place and notes to herself and quotes taped up. I think we were really important to her. It was just the 3 of us, me and my mother and my brother. And I think her work was really important to her. She wanted to find love, but when I was growing up, there were some boyfriends kind of off camera, like there were men she would go, and there was a man she had an affair, a married man she had an affair with for a few years who we knew, but she didn't have a real partner the whole time I was growing up. So I think she wanted the right kind of love in her life, but she didn't want to compromise, and she couldn't find it, and I don't know, it felt like her real priority was her work.
We had more in 5 minutes than in 11 years with Barbara. No, man. More guts, more life, more shit happening in the air between us. Just more, man. If you had less, you know when you got more, man. You say it out loud to yourself. It's not just me. It's not just her. She's not backing away. I'm not backing away. It's a fuse. We touch the same wires. I learned to trust what I was doing, and to trust in general the world that was being created. At that time, it was trusting it with what we were doing in the movies. I want magic, real magic. All of a sudden, things start to happen. But eventually I realized that it was for a lot of things that I learned that kind of trust. She always inferred that you're good enough, so go on and trust what you're doing. And sometimes for performers, it's hard to hear. And we always expect criticism of a certain level, or some sort of pushback on whatever. And Kathy never did that. And I learned that, and I guess it still goes on for me in that way, even today, that, yeah, trust it. Trust, Surette, it's okay. Do this, right? And it will either work or it won't. There are always two options. It's going to work or it's not. And if it doesn't, then you can do something else. But don't not do it because you're trying to find your way, thinking that you have to do something that everybody else, to do it for everybody else. So you're trying to figure out what would they like to see, or how would they like this to be, or, you know, in life as well as in any part of the arts. She and I, we would just sit and talk for a long time about, I guess for me it was just people, just how are you a people? There were times when we were just driving along in the car and she was telling me some story or other, and I would start to sweat, get sopping wet from the tone in her voice. Man, absurd feelings for a life that had juice rang in her voice. My fingers kept slipping from the wheel. Everything was serious. Nothing was serious. Everything was possible. Life made complete sense because it made no sense. But that was all right. It was enough. The tone of her voice was enough. Then the other thing was artistic honesty was really important to her, and integrity, and thought. She thought through things, and then she would present them, and ultimately, it served the larger sense of it, not just whatever that moment was in a script or in a play.
And I know I'm right. I know I can prove it. My head just starts dancing like crazy. But that's so cold, Mom, and so dry. How does someone like you produce a child who thinks so very, very much?
When I think of Kathy, I think of several different worlds. The one I knew most would be the artistic writer, director, as well as the mother, because I was around her kids so much. And then there were the people that she knew from the civil rights movement. And Kathy was there with people who were really involved in the setup of how things were going to happen. And she was along I don't know exactly what the relationship was, but I know that she was there with Dr. King, and she helped write things for, and do things. Her work in the movement was probably more formal than mine, because I was more of a street, what they would call foot soldier type, or street arts worker. And so it was a different understanding of it. But I think it was that shared thought of what went on down there and how we felt about it that also was in the room when we would sit and talk. Yeah, just it was a passage. For me, it was like a rite of passage. And I think for her it was as well, that we both were feeling that there was something going on in the world and we couldn't sit here. We had to go to where that was. And she did it all the time. Actually, what happened, that once I realized you could just sort of have something happen and you can do something about it, but you didn't have to do something about it right here. And I think it was from Kathy. And I guess what I'm suggesting is she traveled all the, I mean, maybe not all the time, it seemed like she traveled a lot, but she was always going overseas to somewhere. And I had gone to France, Switzerland, and Italy with a play. And it was a really great experience. And then when I got back, a couple of years later, a lot of things started going wrong. That, not professionally, mostly it was that I had a lot of deaths in a very short period of time. And with the last one, it was cumulative in that way. So I decided to do something, but I didn't know what. And I just decided, well, I'll just go to France, because I had been there. And I don't know that kind of decision would have been the one I would have made had it not been that I saw the world, the looseness of the world in a way that I knew I could fit in somewhere else and not take everything like luggage across the water. And so I did, and then went back and stayed for a few months. Went to France, stayed for a few months, and it just cleared everything up. You know, and I came back and Kathy sort of said, yeah, I was France, you know, and it was cool, it was cool. Yeah, so she gave me the feeling that you're expected to go out and do things and find out things about people, places, and ideas. And it was so clear in the way she handed me that. I had an uncle who cried himself to sleep. Yeah, it's quite a true story, and it ended badly. He utterly honored his sorrow, gave into it with such deep and boundless weeping that it seemed as I stood there, he was the bravest man I had ever known.
Her own life was defined by her mother's death, and missing her mother and her complicated relationship with this stepmother and her father. I think she was very preoccupied with loss, as I have been. I think I'm very lucky to have had such a capable mother. She really taught me that I could take care of myself, right, and do anything, because she was such a good role model in that way.
I don't know that I knew some of the deeper things that were happening for her, the things that maybe she was working through. I don't know that I saw that, because I didn't want to. As a matter of fact, when she became sick, and I was around a lot, but I decided that wasn't happening. I gave her every reason why that wasn't happening. So if I saw that she was thinner, I said, you know, it's that vegan diet or something. It was when she was in the hospital that I had to sort of figure out, maybe Kathy's not feeling well. Yeah. And even though she was at the cancer hospital, she just wasn't feeling well, that's all. So I just didn't let it enter my thought. And she never said it to me. She wanted me to recognize, and I just refused. I didn't refuse consciously. I just wasn't going to look at it. I wasn't going to see it. All the way up to the last moment. It wasn't going to happen. Nothing like that was going to happen to her. In the cancer hospital, I was like, she just isn't feeling well, that's all. So I look back on it and said, really? How could all of these things, the loss of her hair from chemo, the weight loss, except for, you know, wherever the cancer was, her eyes dimmed. There was just a lot of things. And I was saying things like, oh, and then I'm going to, you know, we'll go see this movie or whatever when you get out of here or something. And she would just hold my hand. This is right in the hospital, you know, or look at me and, you know, Surratt. You know, she didn't say it. It was the look that was saying, this is not going to happen. And I just didn't. I just didn't see it. Yeah. So now all of these years later, little things happen, and I said, oh, that's what you were trying to say. That's what you, that was not so much that she was consciously doing anything. It was just, there was a bigness to her life and her heart.
And stop. 2, 3, 4, and